After many long months, Malcador and Rogodorn were finally granted an audience with the Master of Mankind. The order to appear before the Emperor had been timely, coming as it did just as news had reached Terra of the disaster of the Dropsite massacre on Isfan 5. The two men looked up at the Emperor from bended knee. He was seated upon a huge chair, fully 10 meters above them. The chair was bulky and machine-like, fabricated of metal, gold in color, and gigantic mechanized doors of the same gold metal blocked the strange portal behind him. Beyond lay the labyrinthian dimension of the Eldar webway that would serve as a direct and instantaneous transport network between all the worlds of the Imperium if the Emperor's project proved successful. This new human webway would recreate the vast network of warp portals that had once brought together the Old Ones and the Eldar's ancient interstellar empire, and would allow mankind to advance at a more rapid rate, scientifically and economically, than any other time in its history. A human-dominated webway would also truly unite the Imperium, preventing mankind from ever again being divided by time and great distance. The warp gate that the Emperor had constructed in the short section of webway passage beyond required constant maintenance lest they fall into ruin. At first, this demanded only a small portion of the Emperor's psychic might, and so he was able to command his armies and do all that he was expected of him as Emperor. But the hideous monstrosities that ruled the warp, the self-proclaimed gods of chaos, had ever been his foe, and now conspired to subvert the Emperor's goal, as they had since the day he had launched the Great Crusade. To this end, they had tempted the naive Magnus the Red to warn him of the very plot they had initiated, the betrayal of the Imperium by Horus. Magnus sent his warning by means of powerful psychic sorcery, and this broadcast had wreaked havoc upon the protective psychic shielding surrounding the Emperor's fragile webway construct. The spell of Magnus not only allowed the foul denizens of the warp entry into the section of the webway that the Emperor's secret army of adepts and tech priests had conquered, it also destroyed the delicate controls the Emperor had set in place. Now the warp gate he had constructed required virtually all of his psychic power and mental concentration, lest it rip open a permanent doorway between Terra and the warp, flooding the homeworld of mankind with the demonic legions of the ruinous power. The Emperor told Malcador that he had to take the Emperor's place on the psychic amplifier known as the Golden Throne, which provided the psychic sheath needed to protect the new human-built section of the webway, which had been intended to be the Emperor's final gift to humanity before the Horus heresy had begun. The Emperor's original choice of his replacement on the artifact had been Primarch Magnus the Red, but since Magnus and his 1,000-son Space Marine Legion had sided with Horus and the Chaos God Tzeentch, Malcador was now his chosen successor and the only remaining human psyker with enough strength to carry out the duty. In the days before the final confrontation between the Emperor and Horus aboard his battle barge, the Vengeful Spirit, during the Battle of Terra, the Emperor ordered Malcador to summon men of character, skill, and determination who would be tested and trained to become the elite group of the investigators intended to root out treachery across the Imperium in the centuries to come to prevent any event like the Horus heresy from occurring again. The Emperor also had told Malcador to prepare himself for the dreadful sacrifice that he would be called upon to make. The forces of the rebel war master Horus had won a great victory on the blood-stained plains of Isfan 5 early in the heresy. Almost the entirety of 3 loyalist legions of Space Marines, which included the Raven Guard, Salamanders, and the Iron Hand, had been annihilated by Horus's traitors. The Primarch Ferrus Manus was dead, beheaded at the hands of his former brother, Fulgrim of the Emperor's Children Legion. The Primarchs Korax and Vulcan were missing, also presumed dead by the victors, though their bodies had been recovered from the corpse-strewed battlefield. Meanwhile, the war within the webway had been going badly for the Emperor, even though at first the army of the Legio Custodes and the Silent Sisterhood had managed to push back the demonic invaders. They had taken many casualties. The Imperial forces had never had the advantage of number, and each death weakened them, whereas the demons appeared to have a numberless horde at their disposal. Despite thousands of demons and their allies having been destroyed or banished back into the warp, there was always thousands more to take their place. The Terran warp gate would remain closed to the demons for as long as the Emperor was able to power it from his throne atop the golden portal. Only the mightiest of Psykers had the power enough to do this, and even then, most would be exhausted and fail in a short time. Only the Emperor himself had the might to keep the gate closed permanently, and for him the effort grew harder as the demonic forces gathered about him. For as long as the demon horde threatened to breach the portal, the Golden Throne would be his prison. As Horus's forces began their final assault on the Sol System, and the Battle of Terra began, 7 standard years after the traitors had first turned upon the servants of the Emperor on Isfan III, the Sigillite returned from his mission to recruit the foundation of the Inquisition. Only through the most artful of psychic shielding were Malcador and his new recruits able to pass unscathed through the battle lines and come unharmed and unseen before the Emperor within the inner sanctums of the Imperial Palace. Malcador had finally received the call and was now prepared to perform his final duty to the man he had followed for the greatest part of his life. Once within the depths of the Imperial Palace, the Emperor asked if Malcador was prepared to take his place upon the Golden Throne. Ever loyal, the Sigillite was more than willing to sacrifice himself for his Emperor, but before he ascended to take his place upon the throne, the Sigillite had one last duty to perform. He was accompanied by a group of 12 hooded attendants. In stern silence, the Emperor surveyed the robed figures that Malcador had brought before him, and he saw that his faithful servant had done well. Of the 12, 4 were mortal lords and administrators of the Imperium, possessed of the inquisitive nature and unyielding strength of mind. The other 8 were space marines whose abilities were as peerless as their dedication to the Emperor. Some hailed from legions that had abandoned the Emperor's light in favor of Horus's dark promises, but these battle brothers had never lost their loyalty and had fought in the heresy from within. Fulsome in his approval of the selection, Malcador the Sigillite ascended to the Golden Throne, replacing the Emperor who now stood before the edifice of his loyal captain Rogodorn and Sanguinius. Malcador could not speak. Such was the concentration he had to bring to bear in order to control the forces at his call. The Emperor directed the attention of the 2 mighty Primarchs. Behold the greatest sacrifice of our age. Malcador the Sigillite is no more. Henceforth, he shall always and only ever be called Malcador the Hero. At this, the 3 figures retired from the palace vaults and made ready to teleport onto the battle barge of Horus. The task of keeping the demons out of the Imperial Palace was daunting for the Emperor. The Emperor was a mighty reincarnation of 1,000 Psykers with millennia of experience to call upon. Though he was a powerful Psyker in his own right, Malcador was still a mere human. His mental powers nothing compared to that of the Emperor, and this task proved overwhelming, consuming his body and soul in a matter of hours. When the Primarch Rogodorn brought the mortally injured ruler of mankind back to the Golden Throne after he had defeated Horus, Dorn found Malcador sitting wasted, psychic energies lashing across his shivered body, tortured by the psychic bombardment of the collapsing Imperial webway. He was almost dead when the tech priests made the exchange, disengaging Malcador from the strange machine, even as they moved to modify it to support the Emperor's crippled life functions indefinitely. As Malcador was removed from the device, the last flicker of life left him, and the dust of his corpse blew across the stone floor. Yet Malcador managed to prove one final time his loyalty and love for the Emperor, for despite his ordeal and agony, he still managed to gather what remained of his wasted powers, and willingly forsook it to feed the Emperor and allow his master to survive. Malcador's final sacrifice allowed the Emperor to awake from his coma briefly, and give his servants their final orders before being interned silently for the next 10,000 standard years within the modified life support system of the Golden Throne. From there, the Emperor would maintain the psychic beacon of the Astronomicon as a replacement for the now lost Imperial Webway project, and do his best to shield humanity from the worst terrors of the Immaterium. Through the sacrifice of Malcador, mankind would live on, and its people would face the growing darkness of the age of the Imperium that was about to dawn with a single chant upon his lips: "The Emperor protects." And those were 40 facts about Malcador the hero. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to suggest more topics. If you guys have any characters that you guys want us to create a video for, please comment down below. We'll be happy to do that. And if you can, please support us on Patreon. It's a simple $1 a month, and with that $1, we can create more videos for you guys. If you can't do that, it's cool. Just like, comment, and subscribe, and that helps out a lot. This was Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.